Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. This is a podcast for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault, whether as a child or as an adult. Know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. My name is Mike Chapman. I'm a certified recovery life coach and also a survivor. Let's find hope and healing together. And welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. I'm your host, Mike Chapman, and with me today is Dr. Glenn Miles. More about him in a minute. And we are live. If you would like to join us live on future podcasts, you can learn more about how to do so at my website, polarlifeconsulting.com/live. And again, with me today is Dr. Glenn Miles, is a senior researcher with UP International, and websites will be in the show notes. So that's www.up-international.org. He is on the board and the academic research advisor for the Chab Dai Butterfly 10-year longitudinal research project, which listens to the survivors of sex trafficking. He does independent research, advocacy, training, and evaluation of programs. His current research interests includes working with survivors of trafficking to uncover sexual exploitation of boys and young men, including through the use of the internet in Thailand specifically, and familial sexual exploitation and trafficking of young men in the States, labor exploitation of children in tea plantations in Sri Lanka, child participation and service provision of children in Armenia, and he is an active member of the Global Association of Human Trafficking Survivors, also called GAHTS, and he is also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I want to welcome him to the podcast, and we're going to start like we do most episodes with 4 questions. Now it's time for 4 questions, that part of the podcast when we get to know our guest a bit better by asking a few questions. Let's go. So, Glenn, what is your favorite food memory?
Okay, well, I think my favorite food is mango. I remember listening to a sermon once, and the guy said he was from India, where they grow mangoes, and he said that it couldn't have been an apple in the Garden of Eden. It must have been a mango, because who would exchange their life for an apple? But, mango, well, maybe. So, yeah.
Funny. So have you gone to where they grow naturally? And
yeah I lived in Cambodia for many years, and so April was the hottest time of the year, excruciatingly hot. But
I'm sure
the good thing was that there were plenty of mangoes to eat, so that kind of made it manageable.
I bet it. Yeah, and they're right on the coast. I'm sure lots of humidity and so forth, and like near the equator, so you got that rainforesty kind of environment.
Exactly. Very
I'm
humid,
sure.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, what is your favorite Christmas or holiday memory?
I really enjoy Christmas. I think Christmas is a great thing. Cambodia, we didn't celebrate Christmas in quite the same way as we would have done in the West because it's so hot and humid. December, however, is a cooler season. That just means it's 80 rather than 90 or 100.
So a little bit cooler. Yes.
Just a little bit cooler, yeah.
So you sweat a little bit less.
Well, yeah, basically you sweat pretty much all the time. Once you get out of the shower, then it feels like you should get back in again.
Yeah.
But we had a great time. And I remember one year we decided to get a lot of kids over and to have this wasn't Christmas, this was Easter, and it was we basically hid Easter eggs in the garden. But of course the problem is you can't really do that in that temperature because they just turn to mush.
Right.
But the kids loved it, and so the first year we did it didn't work because there were these mushy Easter eggs. But the second time we basically made it into a treasure hunt, and the last place in the treasure hunt was in the fridge. And that's where the Easter eggs were, so that's how we could do it.
Yes, yeah. I imagine like plastic eggs or something like that would work, and then you have like a little toy or candy that wouldn't melt. So chocolate probably out. I know
Yes.
we have the same problem here in the southern part of the U.S. It can be very
Yeah,
hot
of course.
around
Yeah.
Easter time, and yeah, you put
Yeah.
chocolate in those little plastic
Yeah.
eggs, and
Yeah.
they will melt. Real eggs maybe less of a problem, but yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, candy definitely
I heard
melts
that
for
in
sure.
Australia they add, because it's it's hot there, they add wax to the chocolate to keep it
Yes.
from falling apart.
Yes, I remember a big chocolate manufacturer here when I think when our troops were in Desert Storm,
Oh yeah.
Hershey, they would send Hershey bars during all the wars, but then Desert Storm, Hershey melts. And they're
Yeah.
realizing that's not going to work well. So yeah, they did a higher wax content
Yeah.
in it so it would not melt as quickly when they were in Desert Storm. So they had all these Desert
Right.
Storm
Yeah.
worthy
But it just
chocolates.
doesn't taste the
Exactly.
same. It just doesn't taste the
Right,
same.
of course, of course. But I much prefer a European chocolate, yeah, or that
Yeah.
rich like Swiss type
Especially
of
Swiss.
chocolate. Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Swiss
I
chocolate.
traveled to Chile when I was in
Yeah.
college, and strong European influence, and their chocolates were very similar to Swiss chocolates. So good.
Okay.
And appreciated by the adults, not the children. The children, like other candies, not so much chocolate. Chocolate was geared towards more adults, which was interesting
Yeah.
culturally.
Well, I'm a lot more aware of the challenges for cocoa growers now that I'm working with a guy who's doing research on child labor in cocoa plantations. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is to look at the labels and see whether it's fair trade.
Right.
I think there are very few chocolate companies that really take that seriously, and I think that's pretty sad because there's been they've been lobbied for years now, and still
Right.
needs a lot of work on that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what is your favorite church or house of worship memory?
I am part of an inclusive church. It's a community church. It's not a huge one. It's maybe got 80 people who are regulars and a lot of people on the peripheries, which
Right.
is fine.
Yeah. A lot of churches are like that. You got the
Yeah,
regulars and then the show uppers. Lately, I've been more
exactly.
of a show upper than a regular participant just because of life.
Yeah,
But
well, yeah,
before I was definitely core and very heavily involved. And
yes,
now I just kind of show up when I want to. It's like, okay,
yeah,
enjoy. Okay. And then
yeah.
I've got too many other
You feel
things,
like
too
you
many.
need, yeah, there's too many
Yes.
other things to juggle. Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
Well, so yeah, it's an interesting church because even though it's inclusive, there's not that many LGBT in it. I'm definitely one of them, and one thing I really appreciate is being able to. They invite me as much as they invite anyone else to speak. So they value me as somebody who's in the church. Who I'm valued as much as anyone else, and I really value that and appreciate it. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, this Sunday I'm actually speaking about the woman who washed Jesus' feet with very expensive perfume,
Right.
and that
Right.
I just think
Love that
it's
story.
a beautiful picture of somebody who really valued Jesus enough to do that, even though it was a very excruciatingly difficult thing for her to do, and for the way that the Pharisees and that despised her for it. Normally, when I'm speaking around sexual exploitation and sexual abuse and about sex, basically. And now in this particular story, it alludes to the idea that she was probably a sex worker. I really appreciate being able to speak in my church. And so this time I'm speaking about basically giving. And so we're going to be talking about money. And so I'm also co-doing it with a woman. And she said to me that in sociology, the hardest thing to talk to people about is either sex or money.
Right.
I seem to be doing both of those in the same week.
Right. Understood. Understood. Yeah. When I've been able to share on stage, yeah, that it's something special about that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what is your favorite scripture or any inspirational quote that has helped you on your spiritual journey, and what about it speaks to you?
I believe that the story of Philip talking to the eunuch is actually a very significant story. It's maybe a story that I know when I grew up, the whole idea that he was a eunuch wasn't really discussed. And the interesting thing is that I think the fact that it was so important to God that he did this amazing, teleportation, so that he was able to speak to this eunuch who was obviously really thinking about what the scriptures say about this Messiah, and so he was able to interpret it. And sometimes people say, oh, Jesus never really talked about gay community. Well, he didn't, but he did talk about the eunuchs. And I think at the time, the eunuchs were, for me, they represent the sexual minority. And so the idea that what Jesus actually said about that was some are born that way and some are made that way and some choose to be that way for the kingdom of heaven. So I think when I think about eunuchs, I'm thinking about someone who's had their balls cut off, basically.
Right.
And usually because of some kind of war or something, they're being emasculated and so on.
Right. And also, like serving in court, like, yes, I think like exactly. Cleopatra or whatever, they were born for that. And yes. So even before puberty, they were cut off, knowing they would be in service of the royalty. So yes, then there would be no issue of them then having affairs with the female royalty.
Exactly.
So they were trusted servants.
So that, and often they were put in charge of the harems because that was right. That was their responsibility. So when it says born that way and made that way, I think born that way, you can't be born a eunuch. I think that generally, so I think what Jesus...
Well, I mean, you could have like a birth defect where something ain't there that's supposed to be there.
Oh yeah, but it's so unusual. I just
exactly.
I think that is often used by those who are opposed to this idea of as being gospel, if you like. But actually, I think it's really just talking about men who choose to be with other men and in a loving way. And often in scripture, when it talks about the whole idea of sexual behavior with other men, I think it's talking about rape or it's talking about temple prostitution. And we have to put these things in context and understand what they really mean. I think for me to reread that part of scripture and see, puts a whole different light on it than what I had been brought up thinking. And of course, there are those who choose to just be a celibate for God, and that includes some men who are gay and some men who are not gay, and that would include, of course, monks and things. And over centuries, there's been lots of those, and often you had one member of the family would be expected to either be a priest or work or be a monk. So that kind of makes sense to me. Those are the differences that Jesus was talking about. So that's my thought. That's something which, as I say, when I reread it, I thought that's really interesting, and that Jesus did care about this stuff. It was something which was on his agenda of things he wanted to speak about.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you so much for that. And now, moving on, I would love to hear more about your story. I know you mentioned childhood sexual abuse. I'd love to know what happened there. And then your healing journey, what you've done to find healing in your own life. I love to ask what things that you've tried that have worked, and then also what things you've tried that haven't worked. Because so many things are out there, and some are really effective, some are not. Yeah. Some help some people, don't help others. So I always like to ask both sides of that. And then also love to know what you're doing today, because I know we both work together with GAHTS and their research projects and so forth, and love to know more about what you're doing with all the different research types that you're involved with and what got you into that field to begin with, other than your own story. So start from there.
Yeah, so when I was around 13, I went with my mum to a conference in a beautiful place in the south of England. And the actual conference itself was really fine. But in the evening, I ended up where everyone was put in different rooms, and some of the rooms were bigger than others. And the one I went in just had one bunk bed in it. And the guy that I shared with was a guy, I suppose he was probably about 30. And he made a big thing of getting undressed and making sure that I saw everything, not putting a towel around himself or anything. And of course, that I was really interested in that. You know, my dad had not talked to me about sex or anything, and I felt excited by it, frankly. And so then he then called my name when we were in bed, and when I got out of bed and had a look, he had a full erection. Now he made out that it's just what men do. This is, and so then
that's so common with people who groom, that they normalize the abuse that they're attempting.
Exactly.
And that's part of the grooming process.
He started with telling me about his girlfriends and how he was intimate with them. And so it was all very interesting until it wasn't, until it hurt. So basically then the second night, it was just the same thing that happened again. And of course, when that happens to you, then I just withdrew into myself, because I felt it was my fault if I hadn't answered when he said to me, "Hey, Glenn, come and have a look," kind of thing. Then I wouldn't have been abused. So that's how I saw it. That's how I felt it. And so I completely blame myself. And I was already experiencing a lot of bullying, both at home and also with my brother, who was a few years older than me. And then in school, it was just constant bullying. So to get away at this conference and then to be abused, it wasn't good. And I didn't talk to my mother about that. I didn't feel I could. In fact, I never told anyone about it for about 10 years. And I don't think that's uncommon at all with men. I think often it takes that time for men to actually say something. But in the meantime, I feel that it affected my schoolwork. I just lost my self-confidence. And I'm sure the bullying helped as well. But this was such a significant thing. I just kept coming back into my head, and I kept blaming myself and feeling responsible somehow. So that was what it happened. And then something else happened to me, which was actually, I should have said this first, but this happened before that, when I was probably about 7 years old, and I was at school. And this group of kids basically surrounded me in a circle, and then they pulled my shorts and underpants down and then teased me and laughed at my penis. They didn't do anything, but again, I just thought, even now when I look back, I find it very strange that something like that would happen with a group of children, and wonder where they had the idea even. It's kind of disturbing. And it didn't actually, that memory didn't come back until I started writing my autobiography, which I did recently with a Perry Powers group. And
oh, yes.
And he's a guy who was sexually abused by his grandfather, and then found out after his father died early that his father was also abused. So very painful familial abuse situation that happened over a long period of time.
Big on social media and has a whole huge following of abuse survivors out of the UK.
Really, now he's
really UK based. Is that right?
He is UK based, yeah. But he works with people from all over the world,
right? And
I recently did some research with him, looking at the therapeutic effect of writing your autobiography, and it was very positive. I did a survey with 20 authors who actually got their books published. So yeah, if that's a way that you think could be helpful for you, then I would definitely recommend Harry as a way to support you in the process.
Absolutely. And actually, a recent conference I attended, and I've talked about this a few times on the podcast as well. You're familiar with the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences study? Yes. There was an expert on ACEs at this online conference I was attending. Yes. And someone had asked the speaker, okay, I took the test, I have a 10. What can I do to lessen all the effects of having all these adverse childhood experiences? And his answer was autobiographical journaling.
Wow. That's
telling your story, anything you can do to get it out. Yeah. And that's the theme of this podcast, Power of Story. and that you get the story out, but it's so healing to get it out of your head,
Yeah.
get it out of your, get it on paper or however you
Yes.
want to share it. Just being able
Yes.
to share your story is so healing
Yes.
that it's indescribable. And what you say, that
Yes.
just supports it even more. That
Yes,
it's, yeah.
definitely.
And you talk to people who have started sharing their story. Oh, my healing just kind of snowballed after
Yeah,
that.
it was for some people it's been like just a phenomenal experience for them. And I think it's not just writing your story, it's also about being with other peers who are doing the same thing. And of
Exactly.
course,
Exactly.
it's different than just journaling and you keeping it to yourself, because at the end of the process you then get it published and then that gets it out into the whole world.
Right.
So there are things about that process which are very empowering for people, sometimes pretty scary, because what happens if the people who abuse you read it, and so they have to kind of go through a preparation process of what that worst case scenario and what could that look like and what could happen.
Right.
But actually I think for some of people they've said, I want my story to get out there, and they've actually gone as far as to go to court. So, for example, one guy, he was able to use his autobiography in court. When he was in court with his narcissistic wife, he was able to say, this is my story, because, as you know, narcissists can be very charming on the outside and in a short period of time. And so people can make a decision based on not the real picture or not the whole picture. So,
right, exactly.
yeah, so I'm really happy that I did that research, and I'll be presenting that in Toledo as well. That'll be one of the things that I do at the conference.
Yes, we have the International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference from the University of Toledo. And you're speaking. I'm speaking twice. I don't know if this podcast is coming out before then or not, but I'm working on my presentation already as well. So a little nerve-wracking, but yeah, it's me telling my full story to, thousands of anti-trafficking advocates and professionals from really around the world.
Yeah.
So it's like a little daunting, but challenge accepted. And I've been attending this conference for several years and learned so much to be in a room where so many other trafficking survivors are, and we get it. Everyone, you get it. Someone who hasn't experienced this can understand, can sympathize, but they don't always get it. And so, yeah, being in those environments is also different. And then my story it's a unique spin, and that's part of your research, I see. There's not a lot sharing my particular flavor of this story. And suddenly I've become the expert in this kind of area because that's my story.
Yes.
And so it needs to be told. And if no one's going to tell it, I'm going to be the one to tell it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And after all, I mean, I'm a researcher and I can present research that I've done on people that have been trafficked and try to represent their voices. But you're actually the person. So you, of course, are the expert of your own experience. So no one else is that. And that's why you can do that. And that's why I'm also willing to speak now, because I think it's hard for men. It's hard for men to talk about what's happened to them.
Right. Yeah. Such a social stigma against it. But another power of story, the more men like yourself and myself who come out, share their stories of abuse and trafficking, empowers other men. They hear our story. It's like, oh, they told their story.
Yeah.
They didn't die. Their head didn't explode. Maybe I can tell my story to at least someone. Not necessarily on a podcast, but maybe I can tell someone because that was my story. I heard somebody else's story, and it's like, oh, wow, okay, they kind of shared a lot, and maybe I need to start sharing my stuff, and and that just snowballs, and people have heard my story and started to share their story and so forth. And now I've got my podcast where I help men share their stories. Yes,
and the more that you do it, the more you feel confident to be able to do it again.
Yes,
and that's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now you've talked about the abuse. What have you done for healing? And when did you first disclose what happened to you to others?
I initially told my youth leader in my church, And this was quite a conservative church, but he was a very compassionate man and he was very kind to me. But he was concerned about me basically going off the rails and getting involved with the gay community. So he did a lot of pushing back. When I was 19, I went myself. My own decision was to go to get conversion therapy from a guy who was advertising in a Christian magazine. I thought it was the right thing to do. And this guy was very, very nice, kind man. And we talked about where to go next. And I think he himself wasn't necessarily convinced that it was always the right thing for men to get married in a heterosexual marriage. But I think he felt it was more that you just had to accept that this is going to be a celibacy was the way forward. And so that was hard because I didn't want to be on my own, but I accepted that that was what I had to do. And so there were various follow-up kind of weekends away with another organization, and it was more of the same things.
Right.
And so that was my stance for a long period in my life. But at the same time, I trained to be a nurse. And I specialized in children's nursing, pediatric nursing, and all of that. I felt like God was leading me in that process. And then I went and did some work overseas in India and Pakistan. And I felt like this is what God's called me to do. I focused on child health to start with. I ended up doing a master's in maternal child health, focusing more on the child health.
Right.
And it was specifically...
Let's back up a little bit. You mentioned you did this conversion therapy.
Oh, yes.
That was not terribly successful. But then what other things have you done to help with your own healing?
Yes. Okay. It's a good question. I think I tried some counseling outside of that, and it just didn't really help. And I think...
Was it more just talk therapy?
Yeah.
A CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it was more that kind of thing.
Right.
But
right, which doesn't go very deep with trauma, and probably judging by your age and when you probably went through it, none of this brain theory and so forth and all the trauma therapies hadn't even been developed yet.
Exactly.
EMDR, 15 years, something like that?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, yeah.
There just wasn't that much knowledge.
I think I just plodded on, really. And I ended up working in a refugee camp in Thailand with Cambodian refugees. And I really, really felt, okay, this is good. I'm feeling this is what I should be doing. So that was good. And I somehow felt like God was with me, even in very difficult circumstances, and even knowing my past and what had happened and everything, even though I was still judging myself and telling myself that I'd been a bad boy and all this, I somehow felt there's something special about feeling a calling. It's like you're heading in the right direction. You're doing what you should be doing. And so, one thing led to another, and I ended up, I didn't really properly graduate from high school. I just had what's called an A level in sociology, and it was the lowest grade. And I didn't do very well in anything else. And so that also shattered my confidence. And when I first started doing nursing, I didn't pass the first time to be an RN. So then I had to do that again. So, of course, all these things they compound on the previous time, and you just lose your confidence. And then I worked in this refugee camp, and then after the refugee camp, I ended up doing a master's in maternal child health, and suddenly it was all made sense, and I was in the right place in the direction of where I felt called, and I ended up receiving a distinction in my master's, which I was very proud of.
Nice.
And I went on from that to do a PhD. But in the meantime, I met my wife in the refugee camp, and I really liked her. She was great fun, and we got on very well. She was a very beautiful woman, and I felt like she was really much more than me. And yet we had a great partnership, and I would say we were happily married for 23 years. And at the beginning, of course, we thought, we can just pray the gay away and everything will be fine.
Right. And marriage will fix it.
Exactly.
Right.
that, it's great. I'm actually doing, yeah, this is good. So, and that, of course, we couldn't. That is not the way to fix it. And it was disappointing because, and no, and it was really hard for other people to understand, but we didn't, even though I was really honest with Siobhan, even before we got married, that I had this attraction to men, she couldn't understand really why I couldn't just stop these feelings, but I couldn't. She said to me she didn't really want me talking about it with other people. So that made it also very hard
Right.
because I didn't have anywhere for it to go. It was all just internal. So we worked in Cambodia for many years.
So you were still together but apart.
Yes, no, we were together, and we had our family with us in Cambodia, and we went from Cambodia to Wales, and Wales to Cambodia, and back again.
Right. Right.
And so
But
that
when you
was
decided to split, you were still together, but just
Oh no, we
not
didn't
together.
split. Sorry, I didn't
Okay.
mean to. That was not. No, there was never a split. There was times when she was fed up with me, but mostly, like I say, she didn't want me talking about it with other people, and that was hard for me because I needed to talk about it with other people. And then she developed breast cancer, and that was really tough. But we still felt that we should be in Cambodia. So even though the condition was that she had to come back once a year to get all the checkups, but she did okay, but I think it did weaken her whole
Of
body
course.
when all the chemo and radiotherapy and everything that was
Right.
tough. So when we
Yeah.
came back, and then I got an autoimmune disease, and I think, to be honest, I think that was as a result of all the chronic and acute stresses over the years of different things that we had experienced. And you can read about it in my book. But yes,
Links will be in the show notes.
yes, quite. So the autoimmune disease is, I think there's more and more people that are getting that now. And I had a sarcoidosis, which usually affects the lungs. For me, it was the main challenge has been fatigue, really heavy fatigue, and that just affecting every aspect of your life, really.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
somehow I managed to continue to work as a kind of advisor and supervisor of other people doing PhD programs and
Right.
traveling. I've done quite a bit of traveling around the world. But a year after we arrived back into Wales in the UK, my wife died of sepsis. It was very sudden, literally within hours, and it was devastating for the whole family. By this time, I've got 3 daughters, one of whom was adopted. They were teenage girls, all of them at that point, and it was very tough. I hadn't anticipated how challenging it would be to not have someone by my side who I could talk to about stuff and who would love me, basically. It was an excruciating time, really. So after some years, a few years, I was still had lots of friends, and that's one of the things I feel has been, Mike, when you're asking about how did I get through stuff and how did I receive healing, I think friendship is underrated. I think one of the challenges, if you've been traumatized, is actually building friendships, because you tend to expect people to do something bad to you anyway at some point. So just why make the effort to build a relationship with them? And that, whereas I think, no, I'm not choosing to do that. I'm choosing to reach out and to build friendships and to build relationships with people. So one of the people that I was building a relationship with was a woman. And at one point she said to me, so where are we? Where are we going with this? And it just hit me. And I thought, I can't do this again. I really liked her. She was a really nice friend, but I just didn't want to do the same to her that I'd done with Siobhan, which was to basically to have a sexless marriage where it's a constant strain. I just couldn't do that. So at that point, I had to really think about what I was doing. And then I started reading what the other side was saying in the Christian gay debate about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And,
and there's a lot of different viewpoints in that realm.
Yes, all the way. Yes. Absolutely, yes. Yeah. But I was really open to what the right thing was to do. But in the end, I felt, no, this isn't right. It's okay for me to love another man. And so since then, I've been pursuing a relationship with another guy. And I haven't found anyone yet to be a lifelong partner yet, but we're still still open and I'm still hoping. Yeah.
Yeah. So now your children, do they know about what happened and where you
Yes.
are now in your sexuality and all that, plus the abuse history? And how did that go?
Yes. It's interesting because, well, I did, first of all, I told my sibling. I think I told them first. I can't remember which round it was, but I told my siblings. My brother lives in New Zealand with his wife. And when I wrote the book, inside the book, I had said that he was a bully. He bullied me. And so that was a bit of a challenge for him to read that because he thought, well, we've already resolved this. I've said to you that I'm sorry. But I think he genuinely was sorry and he accepted that that was my story and that I needed to put it in. So that was good.
Right. And I think I'm the youngest of three.
Yes.
And even if you live in the same household,
Yes.
you were in different families because birth order, what happened to you,
Yes.
it's your perspective of things.
Yes.
Very, very different from child to child, even within the same household.
Yes.
So, like, I experienced being the baby of the family, whereas
Yes.
my oldest sister, she was the eldest.
Yes.
She had all this responsibility put up on her, and the middle, she felt isolated and so forth, and the peacemaker, so all these roles and so forth. Everyone had an entirely different upbringing, even though you're in the same household, same people, but because
Yes,
of your
that's
experiences, they were all different, and all your perspectives are quite different in how you were raised.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's actually really helpful, Mike, for people to hear that as well, because I think, yeah, that was definitely true in my family. Yeah, I spoke with them. Yeah, they were all accepting actually. And one of the really interesting things that happened was both my older sister and my younger sister, both of them said to me that my mother had known that I was gay all along, but she hadn't told me. She never talked about it. So they said when I got married to my wife, my mum was quite shocked, wondered what I was doing, but she never spoke to me about it, and I never talked to her about it. And I do regret not talking to my parents before they died. I think that I should have done, but yeah, we are.
Right.
I didn't. But when it came to my children, my oldest daughter, she considers her, they consider themselves to be gender fluid and also her partner as well. And so it wasn't a big deal for her at all. And the other two, they fully accepting really. And when I came out on Facebook, which is quite a thing when you have, it's quite a thing to do because you never quite know what responses you're going to get. They got very protective of me, put it like that, especially about what people said. So that was actually very nice. It was very comforting that they felt that they needed to do that in a way, and I love them for that. I think that was very touching. I really I think my wife and I always brought our children up to be very independent and thinking, and so they're very open to other people's perspectives. They've lived overseas in very challenging situations. So I think they could see it for what it was and wanted me to be happy, really. So, yeah, that was good. I mean, I know for some people they haven't got that luxury of family accepting them. And I didn't know. I did have people, I had one very good friend who said to me, now everything's changed. And I said, what do you mean? Nothing's changed. I'm still Glenn, still the same person. I still love you for who you are. But it basically separated us for quite a long time until we both felt comfortable with trying to renew our friendship. But those things can hurt when you've people that you don't, and some of the people who you don't expect to react do react, and other people who you think that they probably will react, then they have a different perspective. So I remember one couple, an elderly couple that I spoke with, who I was actually nervous about talking to them because I really loved them, and they were always incredibly kind and nice. And the man, that he kind of said, well, couldn't you live with someone but not have sex with them? So that was an interesting perspective. And then his wife said, well, I've never been in your position, so I don't know what to say and I don't want to say anything. And I thought, wow, that was very, very interesting, different perspectives, both trying to be kind. And I think that's, like you said, Mike, there's this whole spectrum of ideas of what people think should be acceptable and not.
Right.
I'm glad to be in part of a church now that there's no reason why I couldn't be accepted on leadership. Whereas I know some churches, they're okay if you're in the congregation, but they're not okay
Right.
if you want to
Right.
do anything more than that, because somehow you're inferior. You're not.
Understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you do so much with the research, and I know you worked overseas, so many different projects. Is that what then moved you into this research and looking into trafficking and being an
Yes.
advocate?
Yes. So what happened actually in my PhD research in Cambodia is that boys experience violence, including sexual violence, more frequently than girls. And this was a project where we did research in 5 schools from every province in Cambodia. So it was a good representative study. And it was a shock to me, actually. And I was very pleased to be able to present those results. And a lot of people didn't believe it. They just assumed that it
Right.
must be wrong.
Right. And how
Then
were you able to get those numbers? Just through interviewing and getting them to a point, because boys don't tell.
no, exactly.
So
No,
yeah. So how were you able
it
to
was
get to those
it was
stats?
anonymous questions.
Okay.
I think you're right, and I think Cambodian children are becoming less afraid of things because we're talking about a post-genocidal society where if you say things that are inappropriate, then you're likely to get killed. So you just keep quiet. That's what their parents would be like, and so they're passing that down to their children as well. So that's the effect that it has, and so it takes two or three generations before you get this more confidence in the youth community that's happening now. It made me think about it, and then I had an opportunity of doing some research in India with a guy there who was a very flamboyant gay man, and he introduced me to sexual exploitation of boys in Mumbai in India, and it was very
The
disturbing.
fact that it happens, not, hey, let's come do this.
No, no,
But
no. I mean, this guy, he wouldn't normally take people to go and see it, but he knew that this is what I was wanted, and I was
right,
looking to do research. And
right.
he,
Showing you the realities of what was
yeah,
happening in that
exactly, the
country,
reality,
right?
exactly. And you had everything from young boys to, big muscular men and everything in between. And it was by a traffic light, basically. So that was my first introduction. And I said to him, "Do you think it happens in Cambodia?" And he said, "Yes, of course it happens in Cambodia."
Right.
Because we're talking about different levels. So before it was sexual abuse, and now this is sexual exploitation and trafficking.
Right.
So I invited him to come to Phnom Penh, and within a week he told me about all these various places where it was happening, and he just did it undercover. Well, he just went as a gay man, and then we ended up doing research by going into these various kind of male brothels and so on, massage parlors, and we did some research, and it was concerning the amount that was actually happening. And then, of course, it wasn't just what we found; it was also what we heard. So in the end, I decided that this was something I wanted to focus more attention on. So we ended up doing it in other cities in Cambodia, in Thailand, and in the Philippines, because all of those are in Southeast Asia. And honestly, we started off where I was getting some funds, and we ended up where we didn't really have any money, and we were doing it all on a shoestring. So we've never been able to do big surveys or anything like that. They've always been small surveys in red light areas or in places where we know that people are particularly vulnerable. But one of the things we did find was that with street children, street boys in particular, often experience sexual violence. It's not common for them not to, actually. And we found that in all 3 of the countries as well. One time when we were in the Philippines, we got hold of the statistics, and the statistics said that there were.
So by violence, above and beyond the trafficking, which is violent in and of
In
itself,
itself,
forcing
yeah.
sex, but above that, experiencing physical violence on top of the sex acts.
Physical and sexual violence where there's not gentle handling or anything like that. And so, yeah, forcing them to have sex when they may not want to. And especially when we're talking about children anyway, they can't consent, can they?
Right.
it was something that we found a lot of and something there was very little information about. With girls in the last 10, 20 years, there's been this massive surge in information about sexual exploitation of girls and women, young women in particular. But we found actually, some of the stats were not so different. For example, when we looked at this statistics that we got from the Philippine government, that we actually had more in our survey of 50 street boys that had been sexually exploited than they had for the statistics for the whole country. It was just like, well, that was crazy. Finding local organizations who were willing to talk about this and open up and learn. So you're not just thinking about street children's physical needs, but you're also thinking more on their emotional needs and
Right.
how do you deal with that? So it's been a journey, actually. But this whole process of getting more involved in understanding sexual abuse and exploitation of boys, and then we also went on to look at sexual exploitation of transgender as well, which was another whole hot potato. You can imagine.
Right.
Everyone in Thailand, or tourists in Thailand, think that ladyboys are all it's completely accepted by society. It's not. They also experience a lot of violence, gang rape, and other challenging stuff as well. And it's really sad when you hear the stories.
Right.
In Cambodia, we could only do research at about 3 a.m. because that was the time when they were not that's the time when they could be on the streets, but not beaten up. And the police I saw a policeman actually physically kick a transgender while he's going along on his motorbike. It's terribly sad. And one of the things we found when we were doing this research and uncovering things was organizations, when we asked them, could you help more with boys? And many of them said, no, we won't get funding. So for example, they'll get funding for girls and for young women. They won't get funding for boys and young men.
Right.
Which is really unfair. And we would give them the statistics, we would give them information, we would give them quotes of what people said, but they would say, no, I know if I take this back to the board, they won't want to do anything about it. So that was really tragic, actually.
Right. Absolutely. Worldwide, such a disparity between services for male victims versus female victims.
Yes, exactly.
That very little, if any, resources are available. And
Yes.
I think the two of us, along with others, are hoping to change that. Brings me to, you mentioned in your intro, a research on familial sexual exploitation and trafficking of young men in the States, which is a topic of interest for me because that is my story as well.
Yes.
What have you found out? What are you learning? What are you doing now? What kind of research things are you doing?
I was supervising research project for a woman who was doing her master's, and she...
Was this Ana Lucia?
Yes.
Yes, she interviewed me for her research.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
Oh, did she? Okay, that's great. Okay.
Yes.
So she was a phenomenal woman who really got how to interview men.
I'm trying to get her on the podcast and interview her for her story, for all of her research and advocacy and so forth.
So she can tell you more about the research.
Absolutely.
But I supervised her, which I was delighted to do. And it took several years for us to get through the process. But once she had finished, I talked to the committee and said, do you have any way that you can say this is exceptional? And they said, oh, yes, we can give her distinction. And so she ended up getting distinction for it, although she did have to fight for it, I have to say. So she did very good interviews with people. And the thing that made it really work was that she had such good relationships with all of her participants that she could go back to them and say, look, you said this, but can you tell me more about that? Because I was trying to understand it.
Right.
Which normally can't do in research. Once you've done it, it's done, unless it's a longitudinal research project. And in some ways, it kind of was. She did it over this period of time.
Right. And she interviewed me several times, a few follow-ups here and there as well.
Yeah.
And when she presented at the International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference. I have to say the whole thing. I can't remember the initials. A few years ago, my story was part of the research that...
Very good, yeah.
How my father does it, and I'll share that with my own story.
Yes.
But that was part of her thing, showing examples of my specific experience. And it was like, I felt so seen with
That's
that
good.
research.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, I'm like tearing up. I was a mess. But yeah,
Yeah,
just feeling so seen by that because
exactly.
no one talks about it. They talk about girls, they don't talk about boys, and the experiences are
And
so
I think she
different.
says
And
she
yeah,
interviewed different men. You know, some of them had never had that extensive discussion with anybody before. And so that was incredibly healing because she did do it in a very therapeutic way.
right, absolutely. Yeah,
I was very proud to be her supervisor on that. And she was also working for Interpol and she could do training with Interpol. And so she was in an ideal situation to be able to proliferate what she had done and make sure that other people were aware of it and really understood it.
right.
So I was very proud. If I'm writing my CV out, I definitely want to put her somewhere in there to say that this is one of the ways we've got our information out over the years.
Right, exactly. And I'm including some of her research in my own story because she's basically telling a big part of my story.
Yeah, very good.
Her stats are very valuable for sure.
So when she
So,
published, I was on the
right,
paper as well, which was really, really good. I felt that was because we spent quite a lot of time massaging it all, making it perfect for the.
exactly, exactly. So, what else are you doing now?
Yeah. So
You have your book,
I have my
obviously.
book, yeah. So that I'm really happy that that's out there. That was published towards the end of last year. Actually, I think it was about this time last year. So it's still very new. And I'm doing a number of these podcasts, which I really like. And I like the way that this one in particular, it's like I can talk about both my research and my own personal story.
Right, right,
Yeah. So I'm a lot of what I'm doing is supervising PhD students, but I'm also independent. So I'm not working under a university. And of course, the nice thing would be if I was and I'd get paid. I don't really get much money. So I'm living on a shoestring, as they say. But I'm doing what I really want to do and what I feel called to do. So that's important. So as well as focusing on boys and young men and transgender, and the whole sexual abuse and exploitation. Also, the research with street children. We're starting to look at the way that the online platforms have opened up possibility for sexual exploitation in new ways,
right,
particularly with
right.
boys and young men. And we were looking at both in Chiang Mai and in Bangkok. And that's been very interesting working with Urban Light in Chiang Mai, who works specifically with boys, one of the few organizations that work specifically with boys, and an organization in Bangkok called Don Nam with a woman called Celeste, who's been working in this area for many years, mostly with transgender actually, but more and more working with boys as well. So that's really good. And we've helped them to do some research, which we're waiting to get published. Actually, a lot of this stuff we've been waiting to get published. One thing that I've had concern about is about the way in which parents from conservative religious backgrounds treat their children who are LGBT. And there's one organization called the Nat Maz Foundation, and we've been doing research with them, with their client base. And the client base is children of conservative parents and then parents talking about their experiences of when they first heard about their children coming out and then later on how that changed. And so that's been one project we've been working on. I'm also working on one project in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, which is where my heart is, partly because I lived there for many years. And that's with young men who've been sexually exploited, who have come out of the sex business. And now they're doing research with men who've been sexually exploited or are being sexually exploited. And so they really understand it, and they're really in a great position to be able to ask the questions and help and to support them. So that's really great. That's in Phnom Penh. And then the thing I'm also doing research with young women who are basically working on the street, which so they're particularly vulnerable. and that's in Phnom Penh as well. And that's with an organisation I've worked with for many years. Last week was the 20th anniversary of an organisation I started in Cambodia called Chab Dai, which is in Cambodian means hands together. And they focus a lot on trying to get organisations to work together and learn together. And that's been a great journey with them. There's also, I'm supervising a guy who's doing research in Kenya, and he's looking at sexual exploitation of children in funerals. Which is, it's not what you expect, of course, at all, is it?
Right.
But people get completely drunk, and then one thing leads to another, and apparently it's happening a lot in certain areas in Kenya. So his idea is to work with children so they themselves create ways in which they can communicate to adults about how they feel about this. So it's basically looking at prevention using the arts. And so
keep yourself safe and self-advocate.
Exactly.
So forth, and know, icky stuff. Yeah, you can tell a grown-up when icky stuff happens.
Exactly. All of that. And so, that's really great. I've also developed a number of large books called flip books, which we can tell they're all based on stories of what happened to children. So one is Good Touch, Bad Touch flip book. Another one is about children accessing pornography. Another is about for refugee children who go to a new country and then sharing about their experiences on the journey and basically being supported and encouraged, that their feelings are valid and that it's okay to have disturbing feelings, basically. So, and then another one on anxiety and depression for children in Sri Lanka. And this collection's gradually increasing, and we're trying to make them as appropriate and culturally appropriate as possible. There's about 4 or 5 versions of the Good Touch, Bad Touch, all wearing different outfits and different skin tones and colours, and so it makes it appropriate for different contexts. So that's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. And in closing, what final thoughts would you have for that survivor out there listening, whether of sexual abuse or trafficking? What words of wisdom would you like to share?
I think what I'd say is to talk and to find someone who's willing to listen to you. It could be a friend, it could be someone who you respect in a church, it could be someone at the pub, or it could be somebody in your community, that whatever you're doing with your hobbies or whatever, or sport, and you know the people who you just have that sense of, I can talk to this person, and to just be able to talk about what's happened to you, and then not be afraid to look for help. I think when you're a little bit more on the process, you might want to think about writing your story. One of the things I found really helpful about it was that I could look back as myself now to this child, and I still, when I was writing it, I could feel those same sensations and feelings. And then I'm now looking at it as an adult, and I'm thinking, no, that's not right. I wasn't responsible.
Right.
He was responsible, and so then the healing begins. So,
absolutely.
I think for children as well, I think it can be very scary to tell someone, and so I really want to encourage parents to be able to talk about sex in a way that's so that children aren't going to be afraid of it. Talk about pornography, to talk about when it's appropriate and when it's inappropriate, and issues of consent and so on. So those are
body autonomy, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'll finish with this, but I think friendship is really important. And sometimes when we've been traumatized, we're afraid of building friendships because we don't want to be let down. But actually, not everyone's a baddie. And sometimes we can develop really serious relationships that can be very loving and last forever. And so that's really important.
Absolutely. And I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much, Glenn, for being here. And we'll see you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. If you would like to learn more about my coaching with Polar Live Consulting, where I provide one-on-one coaching and group coaching, both with a focus on healing for male survivors, reach out to me at polarliveconsulting.com. That is Polar spelled P-O-L-A-R. I would love to hear from you. I want to hear your story. If you would like your story featured on this podcast, contact me via my website. If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find me, and I really want to spread this message of healing and hope to others. And remember, you are not alone. Healing is possible, and the abuse was not your fault. Let me repeat that. The abuse was not your fault. See you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast.